Hey everybody, how you doing? All right, let me know in the chat. Let me make that you can see me, all that kind of good stuff. Carol, hello from North Carolina. Karen, how are you? Good to see everybody. I will give everyone just a few moments to go ahead, log on. I can see loads of people coming in now. Marilyn with Moon, how are you in Texas? Let's see, Kelly here from Stafford, Virginia. Hi to Lisa and Stacy from Sherry. Shannon, I see you both. Excellent. Shannon, I really appreciate that. You always get a little nervous as you're coming on. You're like, please, can they see me? All right. Let's see. See you from Jen from Florida. Hello, Jen. Melissa from New Jersey. Tom from Maryland. Jamie from Florida. Mary Ellen from North Carolina. Oh my gosh, you're whipping them by here. I can see you both. Awesome. Kate, a friend sent me this link. I'm so glad that they did. Yay. All right. Like I said, we'll give everyone just a quick few moments here. Hello, Amy. Hi, Cindy from Tennessee. How are you? Many names that I recognize here. So that is always a ton of fun. All right. Stacy and I are absolutely thrilled that you are here. We love seeing all of you come in. And what I am going to do is let me start with a couple of housekeeping items, right? We have a very full webinar here. There is a ton of information. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to hold your questions until the end. So if you can write them on a piece of paper, that would be great, because during the presentation, I'm just going to continue to go through, and then we will break and then move into our Q&A portion at that point. So make sure you write your questions down so that they don't get lost. Pen and paper. There is, like I said, you're going to want pen and paper. There is a ton of information. And I'm so excited to get into this. It's going to move really quick. There is, I'm just going to say it again, a ton of information, and of course, some really fun stuff as well. So Tom asked, is there a recording? Yes. So this is being recorded. In about 3 hours after this, a link to the recording will go out. Okay. But you will want to stay with us all the way through to the end. I am going to try my darndest to get through this information in 35, 40 minutes tops. The fun really does start with the Q&A, and that's actually where Stacy's going to join me, because I know you're going to have a ton of questions. And like I said, that's really where the deep information comes in, and you have a chance to ask us anything about weave poles. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And what that also means is Stacy and I are going to turn off our cameras so that you can see the full screen, and our little heads in the bottom corner will not interfere with that. All right, let's see here. So let's go ahead and get started. First and foremost, this is all about, it's a free webinar, right? So thank you to those of you that have shared this with your friends. There will be a recording. It is meant to be an educational event. So this is all about what to train and how to pick the right method so that you can have your dream dog agility weave pole performance without the overwhelm. All right, so first of all, welcome. We are so happy that you are here. And the first thing I want to do is we are going to go ahead and put up a poll, because I want to ask you a real quick question, and then we will come back and I will share the results of that poll later in this webinar. So hopefully you can go ahead and see that poll now. And all right, so here's what you're going to learn as we go through this webinar: how to gain decisive knowledge of the 3 weave pole training pillars so that you can identify achievable training goals and confidently choose the ideal weave pole method to train your dog, so that you can take action to move forward and train your dog to weave in 12 weeks. Hi, everybody. If I have not had a chance to meet you yet, my name is Lisa Seltover, and I run Spot on Agility. I am also an agility judge, and I have been, oh my gosh, a judge since 1999, which means that I have been running agility since 1996. My breed of choice is a Dalmatian. My superpower in dog agility is seeing the finer points and making minor tweaks to help dog agility teams be successful. And I've definitely learned that while watching agility, all of these little things that most people don't see. Guess what? I got paid to watch dogs. And so far I have watched well over 300,000 runs. So I'm pretty darn good at what I do, but most importantly, I love doing it. All right, joining me is Stacy. Stacy, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I'm glad everybody is here. If I have not met you before, my name is Stacy Bowles. I've been doing agility for 15 plus years now. And I got quickly into teaching it after I got hooked on it, as I'm a teacher by profession. Prior to this, I was an English teacher. So I was bit by the agility bug thanks to my first dog. That was Kramer. He was a miniature schnauzer. My mom actually got into it with her dog, and it looked like fun to me. So I got started with my 8.5-year-old dog. I think agility with schnauzers is my superpower. I've had schnauzers my whole adult life, and we're on number 5 right now. I also have had a border collie. But my schnauzers have taught me how to think out of the box and regarding training and problem solving, and learn what works for each dog, because they're not necessarily what might be naturally considered the most biddable dogs. I have been really lucky to have a lot of good agility accomplishments. I won the 8-inch Invitational last year with my miniature schnauzer Kermit. I've been a member of the WAO team. I've made several AKC national finals. Kermit won Senna Sports Grand Prix when she was 2.5. And I've also been a member of the IFCS team. So I'm full-fledged into agility, but I also love teaching and helping others create a strong bond between their dogs and themselves through the sport of agility.
Awesome. Stacy, I can't wait for the Q&A session at the end. For those of you that have joined Stacy and I on previous webinars, the consistent feedback was the Q&A was spectacular. And so I've invited Stacy back because it really is just a wealth of information. And I can't wait for all of you to come through this webinar, and then Stacy and I can answer your questions on it. So thanks for being here, Stacy.
Absolutely.
All right, so first and foremost, what in the heck are WEAVE poles? Remember, we always have new folks that are joining our webinar, and I want to take the time to really educate everybody from the ground up. And this is exactly what the WEAVE poles look like. And as you can see, we've got a dog who's in slow motion so that you can really appreciate every single bit of movement that they're doing. And this obstacle is not very easy. So let's go through a couple of basic items. And thanks to all of the advanced people who are being patient and really applauding in the background that we are starting this webinar from the ground floor up, because without our beginner people, this sport will not continue to evolve. So here we are. When it comes to the WEAVE poles, there is always one direction that the dogs do enter, and they actually enter going toward the left. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. And then they also exit going to the left. So remember, enter toward the left and exit toward the left. The number of poles that you could potentially see are either going to be 6 WEAVE poles, which is what's on the left, or 12 WEAVE poles. And then, of course, what I wanted to show you was quite often we put digital diagrams up on screen. And this is what it looks like to have the 6 WEAVE poles on the left and those 12 WEAVE poles on the right, because we're going to be using quite a bit of diagrams here. So I want to make sure everybody understands. Then, of course, for those of you that love tech specs, so the spacing of the WEAVE poles, it is 24 inches in between each pole, which makes 6 poles 12 feet. and then 12 poles 24 feet long. All right, terminology. Everybody uses something different. I've heard weave, wiggle, slalom, in and out. So people may call weave poles different things, but the action is the same. It's a dog going back and forth. They're always entering, going toward the left, and they're always exiting, going toward the left. All right, so why is weave pole training essential? Well, basically, it's often a required obstacle in either your training class or even competition. Safety for your dogs. We're going to talk more about this one. You don't often think about weave poles and safety, but this is very, very important. And then also, it's an important step toward achieving your agility goals. Oftentimes, if you want to go on and do the fun stuff and advance in the levels, you've got to master the weave pole training. All right, so why is weave training overwhelming? Well, I'm going to tell you something. No dog is a natural weaver. Here's what I mean by that. Compared to other agility obstacles, things that they climb on or jump over, the weaves are very different. And here's why. A dog does not see a line of trees in the forest and think, today I'm going to weave all 12 of these. So what that means is it's not a natural action that the dog does. And we're going to talk more about this. And of course, that makes it very confusing and overwhelming. And believe me, Stacy and I have been exactly where you're at, and we are both weave pole geeks. And we're going to share a ton of knowledge. But the first story I want to tell you is on how much knowledge there is when it comes to weave poles. When I was putting together this webinar, basically, I felt like I was herding cats, right? So here I've got method 1 is about to make a break for it. Method 2 is like running after some little creature they see somewhere. Method 3 is plotting something behind. Method 4 refuses to even look at me. And method 5 has already made a break, right? This is definitely like herding cats. But we're going to share the information that we have acquired over the last 15 to 30 years, right? I'm going to share certain details that I've noticed while judging, and Stacy and I have talked about this, and I'm going to share specific information that she also has learned as well. So definitely take some notes. All right, so the main reason we're doing this webinar is we want to help you get started so you and your dog can enjoy training the weave poles together. Plus, we want you to be successful in 12 weeks. Here's what we're going to learn in this webinar. 3 steps to overcome the weave pole overwhelm. The first part, we're going to go through weaving, what to train. Second, your goals and the methods. And then third, how to make the right decision, how to pick the right weave pole method. So step 1, weaving, what to train. So after training 25 years of weave poles, I've noticed 2 trends to live by when it comes to weave pole for performance. First of all, dogs that have amazing weaves have mastered all 3 parts of the weave poles. And second, the majority of dogs doing weave poles usually require retraining in 1 or more of the weave pole parts. In other words, there's a hole in the training. And so when it doesn't work, what that means is something is missing from the foundations or the core skills of your training. So how do you get past this? Well, you get clear on and then you train the 3 weave pole pillars. The first pillar is the entry. The middle section is the second pillar, and then the exit is the last part. The 3 sections make up the weave poles. And I know you're thinking, well, duh. However, guess what? There are many parts that often get mixed. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to share that. All right, so when it comes to weave pole entry, we're talking about the first 3 poles of the weave poles. And here's why we're talking about the first 3 poles. It's what the dog has to do physically to adapt their body as they prepare to engage and then begin the effort of weaving. So when it comes to the entry, here's basically what it looks like. You want the dog to drive toward the poles, then collect, then begin their footwork. And in the beginning of the webinar, I mentioned safety is one of the things to consider in training the weave poles. And dogs that slam into the weave poles with their shoulders are more likely to become injured. And dogs that fail to collect at the poles and then continue to drive generally aren't weaving. They're just merely bashing their way on through. And that is a problem. All right, so as I mentioned, the dogs always enter going toward the left, or said another way, they go from right to left. There are two types of weave entries. There's the onside weave entry, which is where the dog is on the side of the weave entry. And I'm going to go ahead and show you an example of that right now. So this is an onside weave entry. You can see the dog driving to the poles. Now watch this collection. Right there. You can even see all the dust going up, and then the dog begins its footwork. That's what an onside entry looks like. Then there's also the offside weave entries, and that's because the dog is on the offside of the entry and they have to work their way around to that entry. Let's go ahead and watch a dog as they drive, then collect, and then begin their footwork. And that's what it looks like for an offside entry. All right, so weave entries. Basically, what you want to do is you want to train weave entries from all angles. So from the offside and the onside. Let me go ahead and show you some more. So the onside, these are all of the angles that you're going to eventually want to train your dog to hit those weave poles. And then here's the offside, the same amount of angles. And then, of course, the circle that I have and those little dashes, those are just reference points for you to actually train. So you can say, okay, I've done it from this angle and that angle. So here's a pro tip that Stacy actually shared, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. So when you're a beginner, basically, because you're still learning how to train a dog to weave, rather than get caught up in trying to figure out all of the advanced entries, a beginner should focus on an entry that is either straight or 45 degrees to the entry. And you can see I've got that blue line there and then the beginning area. Now, advanced trainers, right? You'll want to train not only straight on, but at least 180 degrees toward those weave poles. And I've got that marked with the advanced area. And then, of course, another pro tip, if you have an option between training 12 poles or 6 poles, I would always go for trying to train 12 poles. And here's why. You're going to have to go through the effort. There isn't much more effort to train 12 poles versus 6 poles. And then we have a dog who understands the concept of the full weave poles. All right, so what you're going to want to do, as I mentioned, is adapt the entry training goal for your level. So the difference for beginners, train advanced entries after your dog can weave. Advanced, you've got advanced skills. There's no reason then that you shouldn't be able to train advanced entries while you train the weaves. In other words, you are capable of handling both of those advanced skills. And here's why. This keeps you on track to train your dog to weave in 12 weeks. And you're going to hear me talk about this 12 weeks a lot. And the reason is we want you to get started, have a goal, and continue to move forward, even if you have to adjust that goal just a little bit based on your level. All right, so that second training pillar is the middle. One of the things I wanted to point out is you're going to see at the top on the entry, it says required. Well, you have got to train those entries. There's absolutely no getting around that. The middle's a little bit of a variable, right? And we're going to talk about more as we watch some videos. And in the middle, the skills that you really want are the speed, the efficiency, and the consistency. All right, so why is the middle a bit of a variable? Well, first of all, dog size, right? Small dogs have a very different stride than a long dog. The physical build is also going to come into play in this middle section. A dog's structure, the front and rear length of reach, in other words, how far forward or back their legs are, their natural tendencies, and so much more. All right, so let's watch the footwork of a single strided dog. So here's what I'd like you to do. Look down and watch the footwork. You can see the dog collect, and now it goes straight into the footwork. And as it's pushing through those poles left and right, that's what a single stride looks like. In theory, this is the most efficient. And I say in theory because every single dog is different. All right, so now let's watch the footwork of what I call the two-paw push. Again, go ahead and watch those paws as the dog comes in. And you can see it keeps both feet together and pushes off with both legs. And this dog's doing it pretty darn efficient as well. All right. Dogs can also mix their footwork. So for example, I had a dog who on one side would do a single stride and on the other would do the two-paw push. Watch these dogs' legs really close and you're going to be able to hopefully see this. Right here. There we go, right in the middle there. So it started with a single stride and then it momentarily went to a double stride. Now, the question I've often been asked is, can a contact method influence the footwork? And I'm going to say maybe. I have seen it work for some dogs, but again, it depends on their structure. It depends on the size of the dog. There are so many things that go into that. So that's why this middle footwork part is a variable, because the dog may tend to do whatever it's going to do regardless of what you attempt. Or some dogs do go ahead and adjust. When it comes to a skill of really focusing on changing your dog's footwork, I would not consider this to be a priority unless the footwork was so inefficient, like they were crisscrossing their legs, that the dog needed assistance learning what to do with their feet. All right. And then, of course, last we have the exit, right? And I consider the exit to be the section of poles that absolutely needs to be trained. So have you ever heard of the 10th pole pop out where the dogs are always coming out early? What that says to me is the exit. There's something missing on the exit work. And some of the things that you want to look forward to when you're training the dog on a proper exit, in other words, that they're driving all the way down, is that they're looking ahead, like they're looking down the horizon. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples in a moment. Also, at the exit, they've got to independently do that, right? Your dogs are fast. You as a handler are going to have places to go. And so having a dog that can finish all 12 weave poles independently is definitely a skill that's desired. And of course, the completion part. All right, so this is where my judging ability really comes into play. I have learned where the dog is looking is really going to determine where they're going to next. So in all three of these pictures, notice how the dog is looking down the line, down toward the horizon. Look at that beagle in the middle. They are just focused. They're driving on down. You can tell by the footwork that they're actually going to finish that last pole. And of course, the dog on the right is another perfect example that they are driving down toward the end. And that's what you're looking for, as opposed to these guys. So look where they're looking. They are definitely not looking down the horizon. The chances of these dogs finishing their poles, well, it's a little iffy there. All right, so let me tell you a story about Miri and Flash. So here's what Miri said. Miri's like, I love Splash, but his popping at the 10th pole had cost me so many qualifying runs. I had tried so many solutions from many friends and trainers. She took my weave class, and the results were amazing. His confidence and speed picked up. He was doing all 12 weave poles, and he was happy. So here's the thing. Splash could weave, but the lessons on weaving through to the end was something that he was missing. And as time went on, the 10th pole pop-out became his normal behavior. So this is a perfect example of adding in some foundation training geared toward the exit was able to fix this problem. All right, so my expert tip for you, focus on foundation exercises that strengthen your dog's weave skills in all 3 areas. Just because your dog can weave back and forth, you still have to pay close attention to what you need on the entry and, of course, teaching your dog to drive down through that exit. All right, so next, step number 2, we're going to talk about your goals and the methods. All right, so what happens when it's not working? Well, when you don't have goals, you have incomplete training, or you're using a method that doesn't match your skill level. And then, of course, your dog begins to do alternate behaviors, right? Look at the dog on the screen. We're not quite sure where he's going. You can tell that the handler is not confident, and that dog is definitely not looking down the horizon. So the chances of that dog finishing without assistance is pretty slim. So when you're missing things like the weave entry, your dog is coming out at the 10th pole, stopping and staring at you midway through, and then you end up spending more time strategizing on how you're going to help your dog get through the poles, that's a clue it's not working. All right, so how do you get past this? Well, number 1, you've got to have goals. And of course, choose a weave training method that's compatible with your current experience level. All right, I've got to address this myth because I hear this all the time. The myth is I have to pick the perfect weave pole method in order to have my dog weaving. I'm going to tell you, all weave pole methods work. So what happens? Well, all weave pole methods succeed because of the skills of the handler. And of course, all weave pole methods fail because of the skills of the handler. So let's talk about skills. Number 1, you're going to have different skills at different stages in your agility career. And it's about time that we started to embrace that, right? Agility is this journey. And when you start off, you have different skills. You're in a higher learning curve than, say, the advanced folks who have been at it for a while, and they've had a decade or 2 decades to go ahead and build those skills. So, number 1, rather than try to pick a method because it seems to be popular, pick a method that's going to match right where you're at in the agility journey. So, my rule number 1 for you, take your team's experience into account, whether you're a beginner, an intermediate, or advanced. And just remember, you're always building up on those skills. The skills that the advanced people have, they spent years developing those. Beginner folks, you are not going to get those right away, and that's okay. Just learn to accept that, and then just understand you've got some learning to do. All right, so I want you to write this down, right? Your goals. Number 1, you need to pick a method that values your current experience and avoid those methods that are either beyond your experience level or below your experience level, right? You want an appropriate match, otherwise you're going to get frustrated and it's not going to be fun. Number 2, I want you to tell yourself, I will train my dog to weave in 12 weeks. And you're going to understand it will not be perfect, right? Anything that you can accomplish in 12 weeks is much better than where you started before that training. People tend to think that, okay, I trained my dogs, we're good to go. And I'm here to tell you that weave poles like this take years, right? This is either a very experienced handler that spent a good deal amount of time, or they spend years developing it. Just because you go through a class, it's very rare for someone to come out having weave poles that look this spectacular in 12 weeks. But you've got to start somewhere, and then you become consistent. All right, so I know that we've got a poll somewhere, and my lovely hubby who is helping out is actually going to tell us what those poll results were, right? So what I'm looking to find out is the beginner dogs. How many people here have a beginner experience? In other words, that they had a first or second, intermediate, second or third, and of course, advanced 3 or more. My husband just snuck in the room, and here we go with the great, all right, the great reveal. So those of you here on this webinar who are training their first agility dog, there's 23% of you, have trained 2 agility dogs, 13%. Have trained 3 agility dogs, 18%. And I am honored to have the rest of you here, 4 or more agility dogs, 44%. That is absolutely fantastic. Welcome, everybody. That is really, really exciting. All right. I want you to remember where you were at, whether it was a beginner, an intermediate, or advanced, because we're going to come back to this information. Okay. Here we go, guys. Let's talk about those methods. So first and foremost, there's at least 9 different methods. I actually know of more. I just kind of ran out of room here, and I wanted to put the main 9 methods. We're going to quickly go through these. I'm going to give you an explanation on those, and then we're going to make some choices. All right, so first of all, luring. Luring is basically what you have to know is it can create a dog and handler that is dependent upon each other, right? And this is what luring is. Literally, all the dog has to do is follow the handler's hand. Next, we have shaping. What you need to know about shaping, it requires an incredibly high degree of shaping knowledge on multiple weave topics at the same time. The full containment method. This is what a full containment method looks like. What you should know is it requires proper setup. It can interfere in a dog's natural foot movement and create aversion due to dogs feeling caged in. Also, it requires a bit of fading in the stages. Next, we've got the wires. And what you need to know about the wires is while it can work on its own as a semi-containment method, we've also seen great results when this is paired as an aid with other weave pole methods. Then we have the weave-o-matic, and this is where the poles actually bend into a V. They can go almost all the way to the ground on up. And what you need to know is it's not appropriate for most small dogs due to that non-bending height of the knuckle at the base of the pole. So when you look at this picture, at the base of the pole, you see that there's silver at the bottom of each pole. That can actually interfere and really not bend so well for the small dogs. While it can be used to promote footwork, this method may not be used for all dogs due to their physical structure. All right, then we have the 2x2 angle method. What you need to know is this is a channel method, except each pair of poles moves individually. Handlers can struggle with understanding spacing between angled poles, when and in which way they should turn the pairs. All right, next we have the channels. Don't mind my picture here. I happen to have the wires on at the same time. So the channels are actually the poles just simply go out to the right and or the left, depending on which side they're on. And then, of course, I've got the wires here as well because oftentimes there's a combination method. What you need to know about the channels, they're easy to use and understand. They promote independence. They work for all size dogs. It's easily adjusts when you want to focus on, say, a specific weave area like the entry or the exit. Then, of course, we have the 2x2 straight line method. What to know about this? It promotes independence, works with all size dogs, and when compared to the 2x2 angle, the pole rotation and movement is linear, and it's way easier to understand in this method on how to move your poles. This method does require advanced knowledge in shaping and rewarding behavior. All right, so you could spend years sniffing out the best weave pole method. And honestly, we used to encourage people to go ahead and take the time to research those methods. And here's what we found. Handlers became frozen in place. They literally didn't move forward because they were afraid to make a mistake. So here's what I want you to do. Remember, you want to pick a method that values your current experience, and you want to make a weave goal that you will have your dog weaving for your appropriate level in 12 weeks. Now, my expert tip for you, pay attention because we've got some really amazing info ahead. I'm going to specifically help you to make the right choice moving forward. All right, so when it's not working, basically what ends up happening is you as the handler end up coming in and helping your dog, which is great, except then your dog isn't being trained, they're being managed. So the weave pole training that you had really isn't weave pole training. And then if you as the handler are doing all the work, well, I think you should be getting the reward. So instead of giving your dog the food or the reward, I think you should be giving yourself chocolate. But that's just my theory on that. But when it's not working, that means you have to come in and help your dog because they're making mistakes. Now, luring, and this is what happens, right? We come in to help our dog and look it, we're doing all the work. You don't want to lure. This is management. This isn't training. Now, granted, I know these aren't weave poles, but this is such a perfect example of what luring looks like. And as you can see, this dog doesn't understand. He's like, oh, I just follow. He definitely does not understand the weaving of the tires. All right, so how do you get past that luring part? You train. Specifically, pick a training that will meet you where your experience and skills are at so you can be weaving in 12 weeks. I'm going to guess by now you're starting to hear a theme. All right, here's the exciting part. How to pick the right method for you and your dog. And here are 4 questions to guide you. Go ahead, grab that piece of paper and pen. And what I'd like you to do is you're going to write down option A or option B. And I'll show you what those options are in just a moment. Basically, option A is advanced. Option B is beginner. Intermediate folks, you know what? You're going to have to pick a choice here because you are stuck somewhere in the middle. So as you're choosing your option A or your option B, just decide which one seems to be closer. All right. So first of all, what's your experience? Write down B if you're on your first or second agility dog. Intermediate, you're going to have to pick either beginner or advanced. And then advanced, 3 or more. So for advanced, I should have at least 45 to 50% of you writing down that you're advanced on this one. Next, what is your intermediate weave entry goal, right? If you are perfectly happy with a beginner where you're just working the straight and the 45 degrees, that is your number one priority, and you're comfortable coming back to those advanced entries, then you're going to pick beginner. But if you truly need and want the 90 plus to 180 degree turn, and these advanced entries are important to you, then go ahead and put advanced. Number 3, what's your experience with shaping and rewarding behaviors? So as a beginner, if you're not proficient and look forward to a coach teaching you one skill at a time, go ahead and put beginner. Advanced folks, if you're like, I know how to shape, I know how to reward, and I want a coach to show me how to apply this to weaves, go ahead and pick the advanced level. The last question, realistically, what can you commit to train in a 12-week weave course, right? We want to keep this real. We want you to be moving forward. So beginner folks, you know what? You'll be happy with the weaves only. You'll worry about those advanced entries later. Advanced folks, you're like, no, really, I can do weaves and advanced entries. I'm going to focus on training both of those skills. So here's what that comes out to. And we can go ahead. I've got this worksheet. Dan, if you can go ahead and put that worksheet up so that you guys can download that. So basically, as we moved through these 4 questions, anytime you came and you said, you know what, I'm a beginner, then that's the weave training method that you should use. Something that resonates with the beginner level. If you've made your way through all 4 of those questions at the advanced level, congratulations, because that's where ultimately in the future we all want to be. And basically, you are going to commit to working both the teaching your dog the actual art of weaving back and forth, plus those advanced entries, plus those exit skills, right? So I'll bet you this is what you're wondering. Okay, so if you're a beginner, which method? And if you're an advanced, which method? Well, first, I want to show you the ones that made the cut. All right, here's what I mean by made the cut. They kept all 3 of the weave pillars in mind in terms of training. So they supported exit training, they supported the middle, they supported the entrance. They were able to create independence, drives, potential footwork. So these were the 4 that made the cut. The Weave-O-Matics, the 2x2 angle, the channels, the 2x2 straight line, and of course the combination. So this is what your weave should look like, right? We want you to take action to move forward and train your dog to weave in 12 weeks. I keep saying 12 weeks because we want you to start. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the method that is going to help each of your levels is channels. We highly recommend that for beginners. The 2x2 straight line, we highly recommend for advanced. All right, so weave poles can be confusing and intimidating, right? And look at our dog here. He's like, yeah. All right, so there's dozens of micro decisions you need to make each time you train your dog. Like, how do I begin a training method? How do I create independence? How do I train solid and consistent entries? How can I avoid the 10th pole pop out? I will say that is the most popular question that I get. Should I use food or toys? How do I train in a way that gets my dog's attention? When am I ready to advance the next step? And what's the best strategy for getting faster weave poles? These are the questions that will help you to either catapult or quit in your weave pole training. And believe me, the agility world is constantly making weave training recommendations. There have been numerous times in the last 25 years when I started training agility for myself or my clients where an under or overly challenging method was used, right? And without a change in method, some of these teams are still stuck. That's why we're focusing on what your experience is and providing a specific weave pole method that you should use that's going to be, that's going to match your skills. So if you're not training weaves with a step-by-step program, you can definitely be blindsided because when training goes off script, that's when the confusion begins. And then you're stuck in a catch-22. You need a weave pole program from a coach who knows more than you do, but you don't know where to start, but you need to begin weave training in order to move forward, or you need to fix some problems like lack of entries or that 10th pole pop out. And that's why you need a weave program that values your current skills. Do not train a method that is either above your skill level or below your experience level, right? You're not going to enjoy it. And you can successfully train your dog to weave and enjoy the process, but you definitely don't have to do it alone. And even if you don't fully understand weave poles or you haven't had complete success with training weaves in the past, it's possible to ditch the frustration and become confident that your dog can weave. And you can finally put an end to the most unpredictable part of your weave training. With a clear level of knowledge and understanding, you can confidently, predictably, undeniably train your dog to weave in 12 weeks. So how do you get the level of knowledge and understanding? Well, if you want to ensure that every step you take in your weave pole training is leveraged for maximum effect and outcome, you need 2 things: education and support. And you can get both education and support in a 5-star weave program. And I'm lucky to say that that's what Stacy and I are providing. We have 2 programs, one that is specifically geared for beginners with the channel method, and the other specifically geared for advanced, which is the 2x2 straight line method with Stacy. So 5-star WEAVE Poles is for dog agility handlers who want a 12-week tried and true results-driven WEAVE pole training that values their experience, whether they're at the beginner or the advanced level. And the 5-pole difference is, in other programs, it's one size fits all, right? So what ends up happening is beginners are in with advanced folks are ready for more advanced topics, and they're working with the beginners, which is great, but we want to separate that out and celebrate your experiences. And that's the difference in the WEAVE pole program that we're providing. So the other problem is with other programs, there's no clear outcome or plan for success, or it lacks the support of a leader where the community is blindly helping each other, and those people in the community are not the experts. Plus, the other problem is the leader disappears once your course time is done. In the 5-star WEAVE pole programs, we start by picking the program that values your experience and meets you where you're at right now. It's mentorship where you get a high level of support. It is very affordable and foundation focused. You'll get 30 days of live coaching and video review. And then if you want additional access beyond not only those 30 days, but also beyond the 12 weeks that you've targeted, you can easily get access to a coach and jump back into the program. All right, so I'm introducing the 5-star WEAVE pole training, which is for beginner or advanced program. Both the beginner and advanced levels provide a minimum 12-week WEAVE pole program that trains your dog to find the entry, weave at full speed, and complete the poles independently. It covers strategy. And by the way, Max 200 is offering a discount code on equipment, including all sorts of WEAVE poles, whether it's the 2x2s or the channels. And all you have to do is put in code SOA, which stands for Spot on Agility. So we have strategy. We have foundation, right? Those foundation skills that you work on for not only the entry, the middle, and the exit. Also, entries. We're going to get you the appropriate entries for your level. Exits, and that, by the way, means all of the poles. So if you're fighting that 12-pole pop-out, let's get that addressed now so that you can qualify and stop being frustrated. All right. WEAVE problems, they come up, right? And we're here to help you. All right, so how much does it cost? Well, guess what? It's probably not as much as you're thinking, and I've got all sorts of good bonus things for you. Bonus training. When you're done with your training, I'm going to give you a bunch of WEAVE pole challenges so that you can train the common things that I see as a judge that are problems for dogs in WEAVE poles, right? These are things you probably don't think of, but I see it all the time. Next, we have video Q&A with your coach, and we are including 30 days of this for free. And of course, we also have a private Facebook group that you'll have access to as well. All right. Basically, you have a 12-week program, 30 days of coaching, and it's $197. Basically, this is the auditor rate, except we're giving you the auditor rate at a VIP experience. And this is about the same cost as a 4-day agility trial. Although when I last put this down, I think now this is probably a 2-day agility trial. All right, so it's time to take action. Dive into the deep end of WEAVE pole training and get the results that you've been waiting for. So, do you want this where you're having to deal with issues because those 3 pillars weren't properly trained, and then you find yourself luring because the cue is more important than the training? Or do you want WEAVE poles that look like this, right? This is absolutely gorgeous. This is the place that we all want to get to in our WEAVE poles. This dog has independence, drive, speed, consistency. And my gosh, look at that just lovely footwork as they're driving all the way down to the end. All right. So the 5-star WEAVE program, you have your choice of either the beginner or the advanced, and enrollment is now open. You can either go to spotonagility.com/weaves, or on your screen, there should also be a link there. First of all, thank you so much, everybody. We are going to move right on into the Q&A portion where we're happy to answer all of the different questions that you may have on WEAVE poles. So let me go ahead and get my screen up here. All right. So I see lots of questions, and I am actually going to make this as large as possible here. All right, Stacy, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's definitely a lot of really good information, but I think it broke it down in a way that really makes it easy to understand the methods and how to choose what's really going to work best for the team.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you on the advanced team, really helping these folks moving forward. The advanced poles, that is exactly what we all eventually want to get to. My personal love, I love the beginners, right? So I think this is a great pairing back and forth. I want to show folks exactly all of those little skills that, they need to learn as they move forward, so that eventually when they hit, that they're working the 2x2s with you, that, their experience shows they're ready for those. And it's interesting because quite oftentimes we look and, you think to yourself, okay, there's lots of arrows pointing down to the beginner part, but hey, those numbers don't lie. 44% of you are ready for the advanced WEAVE poles. And I think that is really exciting. And for the rest, come on with me. Let's get those WEAVE poles going. I'm so excited about it. Oh, all right. Anything else you want to add before we jump into questions?
Nope, I am ready.
Whew, let me get a glass of water here.
You've been talking.
I have been talking, but I love this topic. I really do. All right, glasses, everybody. Whew, tiny screen. Okay, I consider myself intermediate. We go a while with my dog doing well. Then, hang on, let me get to... Then it just says then. Okay, so what I'm hearing is, yeah, they consider intermediate. Sometimes they're doing great, but then they aren't. So, I'm gonna take a question out of this, and I'm gonna give a piece of advice. If your dog is not consistent, that generally means you've missed some foundation somewhere, and it could be just one small important piece. I think that you should go back to the beginner level, find what that one piece is, because it's going to change. It's going to really make such a big difference. And you have to have that one piece in order to advance. So, all right. Let's see. So, Stacey, I'm going to let you take this one. It says, what is the best method to get your dog to cue into the weaves on a course? Beginner here. My dog is starting to be consistent if we're working on the weaves by themselves. But as soon as I incorporate the weaves into a course, he doesn't understand and blows right past them. How can I get him to find the weaves while running the course?
I think that kind of comes down to the 3 pillars that you brought up in the presentation. I think when you teach the weave poles as an isolated obstacle, there are pieces of those pillars that we miss and don't realize that we haven't explained it clearly to the dog. So then we put it in a course where we have speed and variability and handler position that changes and all kinds of other factors that weren't really there when we trained the weave poles to begin with. And then it is really a completely different picture for the dog. So I too was in that boat with my very first dog, and no idea why he was so slow in the weave poles or didn't finish them all or didn't really want to get in them. And now that I know what I know, I'm sure that it was because we literally taught the weave poles as a isolated obstacle. And unfortunately, it's in the middle of 17 to 20 obstacles in a course. So we do have to make that transition and make sure that they really understand everything that's involved in the weave poles as well as how it fits into a course.
Yeah, definitely that transition. Definitely. Excellent. Great way of putting it. Let's see. What is the best? Okay, wait, hang on here. Get you to. All right. Hey, Dan, I have like 4 of the same question here. So let me. I think Dan is catching up with the questions. Let's see here. Okay, I think I have this. We'll get this figured out one way or another. We always love technology. And my gosh, oh, there's lots of people here. This is fantastic. Here we go. They're coming in now. Okay, got it. Let's see. All right. Here we go. Okay. I was at a seminar. Sorry, not disclosing the instructor. Actually, I appreciate that. Thank you. But she said that she starts her puppies right away to weave. I personally have always waited until growth plates have closed. Any comments? I think we're both going to comment on this one. Here is my first thought. Now, keep in mind, I'm talking about the channel method. So let me get really clear about that. I do work my puppies. However, my channels are open by at least, a foot. And all I'm teaching them to do is to go on down. The real purpose in that part is just to get my dog used to things right next to them. So that's what I do. However, I don't close those up. I always make sure that there is enough room that, wiggly wobbly puppies, if they're not going to fall into or run into a pole. So while yes, I do train my puppies, that's as far as I'm going to go. Stacy, what are your thoughts?
Well, as far as the 2x2 method goes, I've had some people that have just begun the very first step of that, which is just the first 2 poles. It's no speed coming in and really no bending required. Definitely puppy safe if you choose to do that. But personally, I don't train my dogs in the weave poles till their growth plates are closed because this method goes really quickly. So there's no need for my puppies to be involved in that right off the bat because it doesn't take very long to train it. And we've got a million other things to learn. So I concentrate on those things. So by the time we get to the weave poles, my dogs, we've worked on balance and coordination and ability to fail and shaping behaviors and all of that kind of other stuff that's not specifically agility related. So when we get to the poles, the actual teaching the poles goes really quickly.
Yeah. Awesome. Which method, channels versus 2x2s, is best with entry collection issues? I'm an intermediate handler. Woo! What do you think?
Well, I think that collection, first of all, is definitely required to be taught in either method. But I think that probably with the straight line 2x2 method, being that you're also concentrating on some of the more advanced entries, which do require a lot more collection into the entry than the straight on to 45-degree angles. I think that method focuses a little bit more on the collection. But either way, your dog does have to learn that that's actually part of their job. But also, again, going kind of back to the 3 pillars, the better they understand what the entry is supposed to look like, they're going to figure out how to collect and get in.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you now what I do. I actually love how the 2x2s trains entries, and that's a huge part of the reason why I suggest that beginners train that after the dog knows how to do the weave poles, because I actually have adopted the whole round the clock is what they call it, for the actual the channel method. But I don't do it while I'm training the dog to actually do the weave poles with beginners, because there's too much going on. Trying to focus, trying to get the dog down the line, trying to do the rewarding. It's too much. So I actually do break it up, but I love the way the 2x2 does weave entries, but I do weave entries separate after the dog with beginners after the dogs know how to weave. So Yeah,
Well, and
I
kind
agree.
of to that as well, the method that I use, part of it at the very end of what I do in the program is kind of create a channel with the 2x2s for that exact same reason. So there are
Yeah.
really some really great benefits both in the channel weaves that you really don't get with the straight up 2x2 method, and then vice versa. So I do think that correlation of let's add this piece in that does come from the other method, because there's definitely benefit to it.
Yeah. And now y'all can see why the conversation that happens after the webinar is really cool, because you really get the finer details. Stacy and I both are really good at modification, what's best for each tiny piece. And that's why it really works with what we do. So it's fun.
It's why training is fun in general.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Yeah. And that's also why I say, take the method that is going to meet you right where you're at in your skill level. And then we can adapt these other pieces to get you to the end result. So, yeah. Let's see. My dog appears to use the weave pole bases. So, Christine, I understand what you're saying now. So, that is. Yes. Okay. So let's talk about the bases. For those of you that don't know what she's talking about, the base of the weave poles, while it is rather thin, it's generally about 4 inches thick, right? I've seen weave pole bases that are thinner, but they tend to be more bendy. What Christina's saying is that her dog is following that line down back and forth. At least, that's how she's perceived it to be. And some dogs do, right? They're living beings. They come up with their own consistency, and that's how they learn. Is that a bad thing? No. The only time that would be possibly a challenge, and I have seen this judging, is where they have poles that don't have bases, or every pair of poles has a base, and then there's a pair in between that doesn't have the base. That is the only time that would be confusing. And if you find that, my opinion, if you find that your dog uses that, then I'd be putting some dirt or something over and start training without that base there, so that your dog can have a secondary skill to fall back on. So yes, I have seen that while judging.
Well, and I also think that kind of brings up a really good point, completely separate from the method, but something to consider, that, your equipment makes a difference. And what you train on at home and have access to most of the time, it's really important that you get out and about and try different types of weave poles in different places, because, no matter what kind of weave poles you have, if that's the only kind your dog has ever seen, then what happens if you have white striped poles and you go to a trial and there's yellow and purple poles, or one type of base to a different type of base. I've also had people who've used stick in the ground weave poles, and then their dogs go, whoa, what is this base thing? I don't know what this is. And they don't even want to get near them. So, that's kind of true in all of agility. The more you can generalize on different types of the same piece of equipment, it really does help your dog have a much better understanding regardless of the method.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent point. Let's see, Denise, as my dog has gotten faster, she's running by the first few poles because she's not collecting. From a standstill, she can make all of the entries. We need to learn collection. Should we pick advanced? Stacy?
Well, I definitely would say in the advanced method, you will learn that. I do quite a bit in my method, add in sequencing very early in the process. So the dog is starting to come in with speed pretty soon once they're learning how to get in the entries. So they learn, as they're learning the poles, they're also learning that complex task of both hitting the entry and collecting at speed. And then, of course, handler movement and distance always are a factor in there as well. So that is something that I definitely add in. But for sure, it requires a little bit more of an advanced eye to work through all of those challenges versus the channel method that maybe makes that a little bit simpler for the dog to learn.
Yeah. And I would also add, so with the channels, I'm also starting at the exit and back chaining and working my way from there. So Denise, I think that the advanced method for your immediate concern would be addressed much quicker. I would caution to say that even though you're saying I only have this part, I would go into the full course with an open, like saying I'm going to take the whole course and I'm going to follow through, because Stacy's got a really good eye and I think that you could definitely benefit from that. So, yeah, don't just be like, "Oh, I'm just going to do that part and skip the rest." Go for all of it. So,
it will all have benefit.
Yeah, exactly. Marianne, if I start in beginner and she's more advanced and picks up quickly, can we move to the advanced level? You would actually have to purchase the advanced level. So the good news is it's the auditor price of $197. So yes, you can definitely, you can purchase it. But I would definitely say if you're feeling like you're at the beginner level, and then you probably are, right? Because what tends to happen, my experience is people at the advanced level, they know that they're advanced level. If you've still got questions, don't put pressure on yourself. Go through the beginner level, get those skills. The beautiful part is there is the separate, working of the entry end of it. And you can always come back later if you want to do, the advanced level for sure. So let's see. You think it matters the spacing of the poles 22 versus 24. You want to take that one?
It for sure matters.
There's a reason I handed that one over.
1000% it matters. Actually, when I started agility, it could be even as tight as 18 inches. Mm-hmm. And I remember when they changed the specs to allow 24, and it actually impacted a very large amount of dogs. It impacted them differently. The big dogs had a challenge with learning how to accommodate for that extra space that they had. The little dogs, which is what I was running at the time, they actually thought, why is there so much space here? I don't know where to put my feet. So they actually had to learn to really stretch out and drive harder through the poles. Otherwise, by about pole 4, they were short and they couldn't actually make the gap between the next 2 poles. So 100% it matters. And the one thing, talking about equipment, that I've told people who have previously taken WEAVE pole classes with me, and of course my in-person students, is that they're like, well, I've got an old set of poles and they're, I don't know, 19 or 20 or 21. And I'm like, you really need to get access to a set of 24s, because it really does make a difference. And luckily for us now, it's pretty standardized across the board between the different organizations as to what you're actually going to see. So that allows you to train for that. But definitely, I think you can hinder your dog's performance if you train on a smaller size, or for that matter, even a larger size than what you're going to be seeing in the trial.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent answer. All right. My dog is very slow when the weaves faces towards the course, very fast when second to last obstacle. How can I train consistency? You want to take this one, Stace? I see you laughing.
Yeah, this was my first dog. When the weave poles were the second obstacle, you could just see it on his face. He just deflated. And when the weave poles were, somewhere in the last 4 or so obstacles, man, he was ready to go, because he knew the reward was 2 or 3 obstacles away. When he started with them, he just knew there was a whole lot more course to go through before we got to the reward. So a lot of that has to do with working on delayed reinforcement in the poles. So your dog understands that we're not just going to be doing the weave poles and getting cookies after the weave poles in training all the time so that you like the weave poles. What you're actually teaching him is you like the weave poles in training. And they don't necessarily translate that to liking the poles in the trial environment. So
amazing.
yeah. And I actually see it not even just in the weave poles. We've got a local person that their dog just, turns on the gas about the last 3 or 4 obstacles. And it's because we know we're headed home to the reward. So they're in a hurry then to get on. So I do think a lot of that is just working on the clarity so the dog understands what it is you want them to do, and that they actually want to do it, not just to earn the reward, but the piece of equipment itself is fun to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I've had success with, this is Bonnie, success through the years with my cockers, having awesome weave training using the channel method. I'm now training my 4-year-old rescue cocker, and he's doing very well in the channels, but is having issues finding the entry. What's a compliment to training entries while using weaves? So I think that there's a couple of things that you can do. So the traditional channel method didn't really focus on entries. And like Stacy and I were talking about, we've actually taken what I think is one of the coolest parts of the 2x2 and have put it right into the channel method after the dog has learned how to weave. And there's a couple of things that you can do to help your dog at that point, just to get their attention. So I would say that either the options are putting on perhaps a guide wire. I don't know if you've had any luck with that. Every once in a while, I will put, and this is just to help the dog out. This isn't a training method. There's a difference between that. I'll take actually an X pen, and I will put it in a certain way by the entry to help the dog so that they can't go past the plane of that as well. But that's when I'm really starting to take the time to train those advanced entries. So it's a training. It's not a tool to make my dog do it. I understand that I'm in training mode at that point. So, I think that something can definitely happen that is different than what you've probably been doing with, traditional channels. And, I do have a separate training, or, we can go through with Stacy in terms of, because you'll be working those entries right off the bat there. So you actually have lots of options. And these questions are so hard to answer because oftentimes we as the experts will watch your dog and we'll see other things that are leading up to it. In other words, it isn't just one tiny piece. There's a couple of tiny pieces. So if we sound hesitant in answering, it's because you're providing us with information. But what we've learned is our eye watching is really, really good. And that's actually why we do the 30 days of the video reviews included, because we want your foundations to be really good. And that's why we've included it. We talked about it. You've got to get off on a good start, on the right path, and not missing those finer details. Otherwise, it just quickly unravels down the road. And then you're like, Lisa and Stacy's training was terrible. No, it's not terrible. We're just really good at it, and we want to help you. So I have 2 dogs. One is a beginner, a 10-month-old Wheaton Terrier. I'm thinking channels. Then I have a retrain who has lost her confidence in footwork, especially using channels. She's a 4-year-old Piershep. I'm thinking 2x2 straight line for her, or Weave-O-Matics, but she's not very big and doesn't look comfortable in them. Stacy, I'm gonna let you take this one.
Okay. So as far as your retrain goes, a lot of times if you have a dog that, never really got into a comfortable rhythm of footwork, then that really does affect their confidence, because as they get into the ring and overall start to get more confidence, they're going to, we hope, do the weave pulls faster. And so if their footwork was not that great to begin with, then that falls apart really quickly. They start making mistakes. And a lot of these dogs, are just really sensitive. They don't like to get things wrong. They want to do it right. And so when we add that combination of speed in and the increase of mistakes that happen in the ring, then that definitely causes them to lose confidence really quickly and cause issues. So I think that really kind of goes back to probably some pieces of the foundation that your dog doesn't quite understand or needs to be presented with in a different manner, so that we can fill in all of those gaps. Because really, I want your dog weaving super confidently before we put them in the trial environment, so that then when we add the pressure of the trial, that's the only thing that's changed in what we're asking our dogs to do for the weave poles. So I definitely think that the 2x2 straight line method could work for her and fill in some of those gaps that you're maybe missing, or that to build that confidence a little bit at a time. With a different system than what she's seen previously. The Weave-O-Matics in general, if it's not a pretty good sized dog, Border Collie or bigger, or a long strided dog, I just don't think the Weave-O-Matics work very well. My guys can't do them. They actually jump them. So they really have to be able to single stride to use the Weave-O-Matics, and most of the dogs, Piaget size, would not be able to do that comfortably. So you would be kind of forcing a footwork pattern for them that they're not going to be comfortable with.
Agreed. And I've used the Weave-O-Matics quite a bit, and it just does not work with the lower medium size, medium low to low. It does not work well at all. So great. Let's see. I tried to join with PayPal, but it didn't work. I tried with credit card. That won't work either. Well, Greta, we'll get this figured out. I can see that people have enrolled. So, Greta, can you send me an email, lisa@spotonagility.com, and we'll get this figured out. And I don't know if you're in a different country and that might be part of it, or just technology just decided to be weird for the moment. So, but I do see things are working. So that's the good news. Were you trying to do channels? Were you trying to do the 2x2? Reach out to Dan in there, but you can also send me an email, and I'll help you out. So for those of you that don't know, I have this joke about tech, that tech and I are waging a secret war, and it's kicking my butt. And so when tech things happen, I always tell people, I'm like, don't worry, we'll get you sorted. Like, it's just my life. Tech just does its thing. It's no big deal. So yeah, just reach out privately. We'll get it sorted out. Let's see. My dog gets frustrated that he can't go as fast as he would like. He's fairly new to weaves. Any advice?
Why don't you go ahead and take that one?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So I again kind of think that usually comes down to the footwork and the actual muscle memory of weaving. Because it is such a unnatural task for the dog to do. They really have to get some solid understanding of how to move their body through the weave poles, which is the main reason why I use the straight line weave pole method instead of the open weave pole method. They learn that right off the bat. So by the time we actually get to where we are starting to really add speed with the dogs, they've already figured out how to make their body bend in and out the poles. So they can weave as quickly as their bodies will allow them to do so. Now, the other piece of that is that, yes, they probably can't go as fast as they might actually like, because they have to collect and they do have to go in and out of the poles. So we can help them understand how to improve their weave pole speed so they don't have to do them slowly, and find a footwork pattern that works well for them so they're comfortable in them. But the collection aspect may be also another piece that your dog could use some clarity on, so that they understand better how to get their bodies into the poles without either just running past them or slamming into pole 2, which is definitely not fun. And if I was a dog and I did that too many times, I probably wouldn't want to get into the poles anymore either. So those things could be causing the problems.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's see here. And I was going to say channels, which generally starts out with quite a bit of running, may not necessarily help with the issue right off the bat, because I don't think the running is the issue, quite frankly. All right. Christine says, okay, my dog seemed to use the bases on So she had hit send too soon. And this is back to the base. You seems to use the bases on the poles to enter the weaves. I tested her with stick in the ground poles. Should I be concerned? Yeah, I think we talked about that. So you just want to keep getting to different places, Christine. Definitely. All right. In theory, how quickly could a dog learn 6 poles?
Which method?
I know. That's what I was just going to say. Yeah. And so here's the thing, right? Even though you're training, and I'm going to talk about both of these methods. So even though you're training the weave part, believe it or not, you're still training other skills at the same time. So it isn't just about the weaving. There's the drive, the speed, the consistency, the footwork, and all of those things sort of come together at one point. You know, I think realistically, for both methods, I tend to feel 6 and 12 is about the same because dogs either get it or they don't get it. It's not the number of poles, it's what happens in between those poles. So I don't think if you said, okay, if I can do 12 poles in 12 weeks, then can I do 6 poles in 6 weeks? Maybe temporary, but I think it would fall apart pretty quick. That's my opinion, just my opinion. So do you have anything to add on that?
Well, other than there's a reason why my method gets to 12 very quickly, because really the number of poles doesn't matter. Once the dog understands the actual mechanics of weaving and they understand the entries and how they're supposed to exit, then they could do 6, they could do 12, they could do 18, any even number of poles they should be able to do. So it's really the complexity of the entries and the physicality of what we're asking our dogs to do that's the challenge, more so than really the number of poles that they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Sorry, I was testing everything out. It's working on my end. So, question from Tom. Let's see. Oh, sorry, that was the one we got. Okay. When you start the 12-week program, should you take the dog out of trials? This is Beth. Go ahead.
Well, I think some of it may be depending on what the issue is. And what your expectations are. Obviously, whenever you're retraining something, you're not going to expect that as soon as you start the program, poof, your weave poles are going to be perfect in the trial environment. If it is something that is causing your dog a lot of stress and you're upset about it and your dog's not happy about it, it might not hurt to take a break. But if your expectations are these poles are not going to be better till I finish my program, and I might potentially see some improvement in the trial environment, but I'm not going to expect it until we're finished, then I think you're fine continuing to trial with what you're doing. The one thing that you kind of have to keep in mind is that the longer you are trialing with less than proficient weave poles, especially what usually happens is the human is stepping in some manner or another and helping or trying to help the dog, that you're not doing that in your training because it's a habit. And it's definitely something that the coaching feedback would be really critical to help you, because there's a lot of things that you're probably doing and don't even realize that you're physically doing to help the dog. So that's probably a much bigger benefit than whether you trial or don't trial during the training.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. I have a new puppy. She'll be 6 months old soon. She's too young to do too much weave, but I wondered if there were new ways to help train her for her success. In the past, a long time ago, I used the old style white fencing to block off entry to the incorrect weave. Has there been new ways to do this? Go ahead, Stace. What do you think?
Well, the containment method or guides in one form or fashion or another definitely originally was a method that people used completely isolated. So while it hasn't gone away as a tool, I think the fencing itself has kind of gone away as a popular method to train the poles. Now, I will tell you that with my puppies personally, I introduce them to, with the exception of Weave-O-Matics because I have little dogs, but I introduce them to the concept of a guide on the weave poles. I introduce them to the concept of a channel. I introduce them to the concept of a single pair of 2x2s when they're really young, just so that they kind of know, okay, these are all the things that could possibly be going on in the weave poles. And then when I actually get ready to train my dogs, I have my one base method that I use, But if I need to throw guides on there because the entry or the exit is particularly challenging, or I'm adding a significant amount of departure with the handler, and that's challenging, and I need to increase the dog's rate of success, those are tools that I can add in to help clarify the dog what I'm asking them to do. So I do think that there is some validity in introducing the concepts that you may be wanting to use in your weave poles, but for sure, jumping straight into even using a containment system, I wouldn't do on a, puppy that's not done growing yet, because then that's still a lot of bending going on in their bodies. And they're not really going to be coordinated enough to make that happen anyway. So, but definitely no harm in introducing them to the concept of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are different, weave pole training methods that always seem to kind of pop up all the time. There's way more than the 9 that we had talked about. But they all tend to, I think the best thing is you look at the methods, the ones that are real clear cut, and then you take the best of them. And I think between the channels and the 2x2 straight line, those two are actually very compatible. A lot of the theories are the same in terms of, the linear, how it works, how we actually, work the entries. They're actually very, very compatible, which is why we chose those two. And they make sense. And they're time tested, which is really nice. And of course, we did mention that sometimes you do add the wire, or you add, something to help out, just to get you through that little next part. So, yeah. Is it easier for a dog to learn channeling or the 2x2 for a dog that's a beginner, or should a dog learn them both? Also, they succeed at one. Should we not bother teaching both? I'm going to answer the first part if you don't mind, Stacy.
Sure.
So is it easier for a dog to learn channeling or the 2x2? I actually don't think it's necessarily the dog that has to do the learning. I think it's the human. It's getting you to understand the different concepts. Part of the reason that we chose the 2x2 straight line method is the 2x2 angle method, even though it's the same as channels, people were getting lost in the turns and the distance. So there was,
me included.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Me too. I actually had an engineer who explained that if you just put, a pin down the middle and turn it that way. And I was like, well, then why wouldn't I just use my channels?
I turned them the wrong way every time I tried to do it.
Okay, so let's talk about that. The wrong way. We don't realize that you can't go both directions on those. And here's a funny story. The first Weave webinar that I did, I took a picture and they were from the correct direction, but I didn't like the background. So I went to the other side and took another picture, and I used that wrong picture in the webinar. Yeah. And it was just because I was so focused on the picture. So, and I've been doing this for a long time. So I don't think it's about the dog learning. The dogs will learn as long as the handler understands the skills on that. So was there anything on the second part of that question you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I think that I agree 100% that it's about the trainer's ability to process and teach the dog the method versus really the method being suited for the dog itself. If you take a really experienced trainer and a very brand new beginner dog that's maybe even not done any dog sports at all, they could teach either method. But definitely suiting it to your ability and what you want to learn and how challenging do you want it to be for you. Of course, you can always do both, and you can do channels first, and then you can go into the other method and work on the more advanced skills there. They for sure complement each other, so you could do both. But I totally agree that it's really more dependent on the human aspect of this than the dog aspect of this.
Yeah. My dog doesn't always get the weave entrance. I'd like my dog to be consistent. Yeah, so we're good. We've definitely got a theme on that. So what I would say is we've definitely, we've answered that one a couple of times, but I'm so glad that you made the question, because the themes that we tend to see, and it's funny, I haven't seen the second theme yet. Entry, 10 pole pop out. But on the pre-questions, the 10 pole pop out was the consistent one. So you can always start to see a theme on that for sure. So let's see. For those of us who have, this is directed at me here. So for those of us who have taken the WEAVE pole class before and are a part of my Spot on Success membership VIP group, should we do beginner or advanced? So you will get the beginner because you're in my membership. If you want to do advanced, that actually would be a separate item because Stacy's doing that one. So awesome. All right. How to increase speed in the WEAVE poles? Ooh, there's lots of answers. I'll give one quick one and then I'm going to hand it over to Stacy to give another. So one of the reasons that I see dogs don't have speed is because they don't know where they're going. So quite often what ends up happening is they're looking at the handler for direction, and it's really impossible for a dog to be driving forward when they're looking right or left. So that's one possible item. Stacy, why don't you add another? There are tons, by the way. Oh, I think you're on mute.
No, I am. I've got it now. The dogs were singing in the background, so I muted it while you were talking. Okay, so I mean, as far as that goes, a lot of that has to do with the dog's confidence, with their understanding of their job. It actually also has a lot to do with not being micromanaged. When the dog actually the handler gets away and does your job, which is to tell them where they're going next, then they're very often able to weave much faster because they don't have the human putting pressure on their poles. So that, and of course, anytime you can make an obstacle more rewarding, then it's going to go faster.
Yeah. Awesome. And actually that leads right into the next question, which is how do I prevent my dog from popping out of the last weave pole, and how do I get her to go ahead of me? She often looks at me for direction and assurance. And I swear I did not read the question ahead of time when I answered. Same answers, really. So yeah, they're very much the same on that. If it takes 12 weeks to train 12 poles, can 6 poles be done in 6 weeks if we did channeling? Yep. It's possible. Anything is possible. However, I would think that it would start to fall apart very, very quickly. And I don't believe that 6 poles really gives the complete picture of 12, and it doesn't take much more to go from 6 to 12, but it's really all of those other skills, the consistency part. It's that muscle memory, doing it over and over. So while your dog, it's possible, anything is possible, right? I think it would then fall apart very quickly. So you really want to be very consistent with that. My dog is very fast and driven. However, when we get to the weave poles at a show, he slows down. Any suggestions to get a more consistent speed from the backyard in training facility to the show ring? Yeah, I think we talked about that earlier. And basically it comes down to the confidence level, being able to transition the skills. Quite often, I always joke with all of my people about sometimes when I bring a new dog out, I turn into a freak. It's rather hysterical because I'm so nervous, and the dog feels that, right? And especially if we're coming up into the weave poles and if I'm not feeling confident, my dog feels that as well. So I think it comes down to being aware of what you're doing, and also taking the show on the road, literally taking those weave pole shows on the road, and the two of you becoming consistent together as a team. So I'm really super keen to hear advice on weave training. I mostly use the 2x2 method, but am always open to new and better ways to train. Yeah, so I think in this one, the fact that we actually sort of combine the two methods, the best of both methods, I think that's I honestly think that's the beauty part about all of this, that there isn't just one thing. Also, the fact that I think it's really important to take your experience level into consideration when you're picking a method. There's nothing worse than somebody who literally, it's their first dog. They have no idea what placement of reward or shaping is, or even what the dog does for weave poles. And they're told to go into an advanced level. And now they have this uphill learning part where they have to learn everything, but then they're supposed to train their dog at the same time. And then, of course, the opposite, where you've got someone with such advanced skills and then they're not using them. That doesn't create fun either. So it's definitely a two-way street on that one. I have a big Doberman. We train 2x2s. He's fast in class, though weaves but slow in trials. I know I'm missing something in my handling, but I don't know what. Would this be covered in course? Stacy, I'm going to hand that one to you.
Alrighty. So I think so. I really think that most of the time, again, we're probably missing a few pieces in the foundation steps along the way that could be improved on. And I think when that happens and we go back and kind of fill in some of the gaps, the human has a lot more confidence in the dog's ability to do the weave poles. So, if we have a dog, anytime I've got students that say, well, my dog does something really well in training, it usually tells me that they need a little bit more clarification as to what they need to be doing, and you need to have the confidence that they can do it. And the combination of those two things will be what will allow you to be successful in the ring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see here. How do I instill drive for the weaves? My new dog doesn't like to practice weaves. He will go through once, but loses interest. He loves obstacles, jumps, contacts, but when it comes to weaves, he loses all his drive. We try to make it fun, but it doesn't seem to help. I'll hand that to you, Stace.
Okay. Again, I think that it is such a complex obstacle. And when we see that our dogs have done the weave poles, meaning that they have successfully gone in and out of the poles before in training, we just assume that they actually know how to do it. And there's a big gap there from having done it to actually knowing it. So I think that that's probably the biggest missing piece there. Because if your dog has drive for the other obstacles, then clearly he likes to do things and probably understands his job on those other obstacles better than what he understands in the weave poles. So I think that, going back and kind of starting fresh with a method that will work through all of those things for you will really make the weave poles a fun obstacle for both you and the dog. And like I said, my first dog really was not a fan of the weave poles. He was a really good boy and did anything that I asked, but he didn't love them. And so I promised myself after that none of my dogs following that would have that lack of desire for the weave poles. And this method was really kind of designed to cater to that. And so my guys absolutely love the weave poles, and I love training them. So I think that also trickles down to being successful with the dogs.
Yeah. And also I think that this is a perfect case where the coaching really comes into play, because you're in the midst experiencing it, but having that outside eye and starting from the foundation and working up, we're going to see things that you hadn't thought of. Mm-hmm. And that's where the coaching really comes in, because I hear the description, but I also know visually when I see it, there's always so much more that we can pick out. And I know that Stacy feels the same way. It's like, ooh, look at this, look at that. Here's the signal your dog is giving, and here's what has to happen next. And usually they're easy things to get over, to train through, I should say, not get over, but literally they're just a tiny tweak that can really help. And then you just keep building on all of that. Let's see here. I'm an advanced handler, but I feel like I need more training on weave angle entries. I'm currently training a 15-month-old. Would you recommend I do your beginner session? I think that if you and again, it really comes down to seeing what the dog is doing on the weaving end of it. But if you're looking for the advanced angle end of it, I would say probably Stacy's, or there's a standalone class on that. But I would say, because Stacy starts with the entrance and the angles right away, that's going to address the question that you're asking us here. Let's see, if you're in the subscription program, how do we access both? So I will get you the current weave one, the beginner one that I'm doing. But if you want the advanced weaves, then that is actually an additional purchase. And that's for that the SOS, the Spot On Success membership that I've got. So, all right, a 5-year-old golden retriever and I, relatively new to the world of agility. Welcome, by the way. We did our first trial in January of this year, and we are currently working on our open titles. She does pretty good at the weaves. Pretty good was in quotes, by the way. Generally, if she is slow and steady, she'll complete them. But if she gets really excited and wants to go through them fast, she has a tendency to pop out toward the last couple, right? And that's very common. Normally, they kind of get themselves off balance, and then the footwork is gone and out they go. So yeah, very, very common with young dogs. Let's see. So I think if there is something you could suggest to help her channel her excitement so that she keeps the speed but doesn't pop out too soon, that would be tremendously helpful. All right, let me address just that part right now. So I say there's some foundations somewhere that are missing, because you do want to keep her speed. You do want to keep her confidence. And what based on the description that you shared, she's missing something in the training and just needs some help somewhere. So I think that this is a case where the quickest and the easiest thing is to start from scratch, and you'll be able to quickly build until that point that's missing. And so both Stacy and I could really, be able to help you on that. Honestly, because you're so new, and right now it's all about the weaving is what you're asking me. I don't hear anything about advanced entries, which is fine. You have time for those. I would say that the channel method is probably the best for you at the moment. Stacy, what do you think on that?
No, I totally agree. I think that is something that will probably get the most amount of progress the quickest.
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing here, and she goes on to talk about sometimes it's a second pole that she enters, but not usually. I just think there's some little pieces there, and we can definitely help you out on that one. Here's my question for the upcoming webinar. Keeps coming out at 10th pole, even if I'm behind or doesn't get the entry difficult. So I think that exit part, so that drive down, the consistency, the not looking to you, the, not anticipating the next obstacle, really building value. So that whole exit training is the part that's missing. I don't know what level you're at to be able to make a suggestion on that one, but the channels do start at the end and then work their way toward the beginning. And so kind of the counter where people were saying, hey, I want to really develop those entry parts, I would say in this case, I would probably suggest the channels, because it's that drive down. And my guess, if I had to guess, is it has to do with replacement of reward and or independence, you possibly coming in to help your dog as things start to come toward the end. Let's see, how to get faster weave performance at a trial. Timid dog is fast in practice, slow but precise in trials. I think we've talked about this one.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'd say if you were here, you probably had your question answered. Otherwise, go back in the replay. But you can see we definitely start to hit a couple of themes here. Definitely. All right. When a dog makes an error on the entry, the most common reaction from the handler is to pull the dog out of the weaves to redo the entry. Doesn't that teach the dog it's okay to stop weaving early? Should we be having the dogs finish weaving before addressing the entry error? Oh, this is a really interesting question. I'll jump in, and then Stace, I'll let you jump in after. How's that sound?
Okay.
So I don't believe in practicing garbage, right? And so if a dog missed the entry, then you don't get to go on. You miss the entry. And the only way, in my mind, to address that is to be like, oh, you silly puppy, wait a minute. No. We're going to do it again. I tend to equate it like when a dog takes a jump, if you allow them to go through the course and knock the bar and then knock the next bar and the next one and the next one, at some point they start to think, well, that's okay. And when we teach our obstacles, each obstacle should have criteria. And I'll talk about a safety one that should be glaring, the A-frame. There should be a criteria for the dog to go up and down in a safe manner. And it's for safety reasons, if anything, right? And I think it's the same thing with the WEAVE poles. We have to be consistent with our criteria. While a missed entry may not be as much of a safety thing, we still have to be consistent as handlers. And when we start to accept something different, it just creates confusion for the dog. That's my opinion. What do you think, Stace?
Well, I definitely think that I agree with that. The kind of way I see it is the entry, weaving in the middle, and the exit is the performance of the weave poles. So none of those are separate from the other. So in order to actually perform the weave poles, you have to have done all three of those things. So really stopping them when they make the mistake of missing the entry, continuing to weave isn't right if you didn't hit your entry. So, you know, and on top of that, if they skip a pole, they're actually exiting incorrectly. So now we're adding another factor that's not correct in the weave poles. So we really want the dogs to know that that's all one piece together. They're not three different pieces that the dog has to do.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's see how to best handle inconsistent weaving. We are at the novice level and struggling at times. My dog knows how to do them, but often pops the gate. You know, it's funny. This is one of those where I'd have to see a video because there are so many potentials on this one that I would literally just be throwing Jello on a wall at this point, and that's not going to be helpful to you. So this is where that coaching part really comes into play. Just, you know, because there's so many things that could be. It really could be all kinds. It may not be a weave pole issue if the dog is overly excited or there's something else going on. Again, you can tell I'm guessing, and we don't like guessing. We like to, you know, be able to provide good answers. So that's where the coaching part comes in. And, you know, I would say if you're at the novice level, definitely get yourself in, take advantage of the 30 days of coaching. You can always get more coaching. That's the beautiful part about this is, you know, you can keep going. So then you train your poles, you get into competition, you need more feedback, you come back to us, it works out really well. So sorry to not be able to give you a much more specific answer on that. But again, you don't want me guessing. All right, let's see. Why does my terrier do great weaves at home, but wants to blow by them at a trial? Stacy, you've got terriers?
Wow. Yeah, that's so shocking. You know, terriers are a very unique dog in that, you know, they are definitely bred to be independent. So the one thing I have learned through training my own dogs who are terriers, as well as some of my students' dogs, is that we really kind of have to convince them it was their decision to do them and that it's really fun to do. Because in general, in a terrier's mind, slowing down to do things is not fun. So finding a way to actually make the action of doing the weave poles the rewarding part is really kind of key, because you don't just tell a terrier you should do something because I said. They don't function that way. So that's really kind of the key, is being creative in the way that you teach it so that you're almost challenging them to learn it. And then when you do that, they're like, hey, watch this, I can do these. And they show off in them versus avoid them.
Excellent.
I know a little bit about that.
Yeah, we love our terrier friends. Let's see. My dog sometimes will not weave when there's a slower, less motivating sequence leading into the poles. He hits the entry, but then fizzles. Is there benefit to him in this course? Yeah, absolutely. Both of them. Yeah, it's one of those where we have to build the excitement, the angle. There's all sorts of things, and what your dog deems to be inappropriate, or even not exciting, or what you deem to be not exciting, well, then we're definitely going to work twice as hard to get that figured out and come up with different ways. So there's something in the approach part of it that that's where the coaching comes in, for sure. And the more video, the better, because that definitely helps us. Let's see here. Or do you start at the end level? You start in for the 12-week program. Okay. So Marianne, I know that this is probably related to another question that is somewhere else. I'll see if I can find that. Let's see. My dog knows how to enter and weave and does pretty well as long as I run the length of them with her. If I turn away to head to the next obstacle, she doesn't finish. She follows me. Should I take the beginner class? Yes. And we are going to teach independence, right? So at this point, it isn't necessarily the dog weaving. It's me helping you to also help your dog to continue on and do the independence part. So absolutely. That's one of the things I love about the channel method is we're going to start with that right off the bat, where your dog works independently driving down. That's part of the reason I love this method for beginners, is we can help you with that piece that oftentimes doesn't get addressed until things like this happen. Let's see. INT in agility, advanced in dog training. Okay, complex behaviors. Have great entries and exits. Canine began to do a stutter step, which is now an impediment. We just finished the novice levels. I'm trying to figure out if you're asking where to go on that. So I think I see something above that says advanced with a question mark. So if those two questions are related and you're asking if you should go into the advanced level, Stace?
Yeah, I think that, if you definitely understand, training the complex behaviors and how to reward appropriately and those sort of just dog training basics, I definitely think the straight line 2x2 method would help with that. A lot of times, again, the stutter step is a lack of muscle memory. So the dog doesn't really, if they're doing it in the middle of the weave poles, a lot of times it is, they just need to find a better rhythm in the poles and a little bit better understanding of how to control their body in and out of the poles. So that could be part of it if the stutter is what you're talking about. But for sure, there's going to be things in your training videos that I'm going to see to be able to help you figure out, what we need to do to clarify this for your dog. Because if you're an advanced dog trainer, then we're going to have no problem doing that.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. My young girl sometimes wants to enter without me close by, and other times she acts like, what are these? This can happen in a weekend. Great one day and the next, nope. There are several things that could be going on. This is where the video of the two of you, I think, really could be helpful. Dogs are generally pretty honest. And when they go, what, somehow, somewhere, there was another thought going on, or they thought something else, or they just didn't get the clue. And so this is where a video would definitely help, because again, I feel like we would be guessing if we, and again, and I also, you said young girl, so this could be the novice part of it. And in a trial, so the next question I would see, is it a 4-day trial? Is it a 2-day trial? How long were you there? So many different things that could come into play. As to what to do, I think that's where the coaching part comes into play. And so here's where I would say, take a real honest look at your weave poles, right? And the times that you are both successful and not, and this is where videoing yourself comes into play. Are you feeling confident on all of these, on the different angles, on the approaches? Is your dog consistent? So, there's lots going on there. Stacey, help me out on this one. Oh, you're on mute again.
Yeah. Definitely that, the video feedback is going to be critical for this. There's so many little things that we don't realize we're doing that are either impeding or helping our dogs in the weave poles. And again, your maybe lack of confidence in your dog's ability to consistently weave is, I'm sure, a piece of this. You're kind of wondering, what are we going to get today? And, when they're really well trained, you don't ever have to wonder. If my dogs pop out of the poles or do something out of character in the weave poles, I'm worried about, are you injured? Is there something else going on? Because they're just that consistent. So, creating that lack of anxiety for you and some joy for you in the weave poles, I think would really make a big difference for your dog.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. My dog learned some on channels, then finished on wires. She remains inconsistent. Now she comes out mostly when I'm off sides and may come out anywhere. The number is not consistent. She competes at the master's level, but she's so inconsistent that she can be very fast and footwork looks good. I would say I would go back from the beginning. I really would, because you started a method, didn't finish it, then kind of put a little bit of a, which I'm sure you had a goal to get to, put the wires on so you could finish. But let's look at that from the dog's point of view. She never had the opportunity, or he, to go through the entire cycle of learning to get that consistency. So again, weaving isn't just about the left and the right. There's so many other things that you and your dog develop together. And I'm going to guess that's the piece that's really missing. The entries from all angles, the driving all the way down part. I think your footwork. So I think your dog is confused and she's 100% trying her best, and it could be a he. I don't know why I keep going with she, but they are trying. And I think both of you would benefit from starting over and building together. And I think that it will also take away the frustration that you are likely feeling at the master's level. Because once you get good weave poles, you can focus on the fun things or the skills or the sequences, and you can take that obstacle and be like, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to worry about it anymore. Because right now you're almost tied to it. And even being tied to it, it doesn't sound like it's working. So I would say start from the beginning. And the nice part is the things that are going well, those sections of the training will go fast. The parts that you need, you'll be able to spend more time on those. Let's see. Due to a lack of space and physical ability to lift and move channel weaves, I'm using fold up the zigzags. I think that's fine. It depends on the size of your dog, and as long as those poles aren't moving. But yeah, that's just a different version of the channels. As you start to kind of, make those straight, you just want to make sure that you're nice and consistent with it. But yeah, it's the same sort of thing. Even with the 2x2 angle, you can still set those up as channels and train it that way too. Sometimes we have to use what we have to use. And I like that. Let's see. What is your view of using the plastic fold-up weave poles? Oh, that's funny. We just had those two questions. You know what, guys? You have got to do whatever you've got to do. You live in an apartment. You cannot keep those weave poles out in the hallway. You do what you have to do, as long as you understand and are empathetic with your dog that there's going to be a transition into metal weave poles and other weave poles. And that's when you start to do the weave pole tour. So you do what you do. Dogs are very biddable and adaptable as long as you do it in a step-by-step manner so that they can be successful and they can go, oh my gosh, I see how this looks like that now. So you just sometimes have to take a step back in the training when you go to new weave poles and then work your way back up. That's my best advice on that. When does registration close? Will this webinar be available after tonight? Oh, I love all these good questions. I have a friend that I would like to share with. Thank you for the wonderful webinar. Well, thank you, Christine. So yes, there is a replay. If you're signed up, you will automatically get a link for that replay in a couple of hours. Registration on this one, class does start on September 8th. We're going to be so what we're doing is here in the US, we have Labor Day. We wanted to give people that last holiday. So we are starting on the 8th. Do you need 12 polls for the channel class? I only have 6. You know what? If you only have 6, you only have 6. You can buy stick in the ground weave poles. You can eventually get to a place where you know that you're going to need to go train on 12. I'm a realistic person. It is what it is. And I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, you cannot participate because you don't have. We're very adaptable. It's about making you successful as long as you recognize, oh, I'm going to have to do this next part. No problem with me. In training, how often should you run the weaves, especially in the beginning when the dog is successful? I'll have both of us answer this question. I tend to, and it really depends on my dog. When my dog is successful, I don't do it too many other times, or depending on what I have been doing, if my dog was successful and finally got it, I may stop and go do something else. So, it's not about drilling, because what I've also found is if you just keep drilling and the dog was successful, at some point they go, I clearly am not doing what you want. Let me get creative. Hold my beer, watch this, right? And that's what you don't want. You want to make an impact and take the time to celebrate when they are successful, right? It's a big deal. I'm going to switch to contract training really bit, but I've gone out there with a whole list of what we're going to do. And as I'm walking out there, my dog goes out and does it the first time. And I'm like, and we go play. We're done, right? You just advanced yourself and showed me like, Mom, look what I can do. Sometimes you have to read what the dog is doing and just say, I'm so happy with you. How about if we take the next 30 seconds and we're just going to play because you were brilliant. You earned it. So what do you think, Stace?
Yeah, I definitely think the mentality of let's do one more is kind of dangerous. That ends up happening because we're reinforced by the success. It has really nothing to do with the dog. Now, in my particular class, we have lots of variability, meaning that because we're working on so many entries and so many exits, and challenges like handler motion and crosses and sequencing and that sort of thing. I like to keep my sessions, they're still really short, but we're jumping around from one task to another within the session. So we're not just repeating the same thing over and over. As I mentioned earlier, I have terriers and they like to be very creative. So we don't repeat things. You get it once, we move on to either another challenge or we change the picture, or we just go inside and do something else.
Mm-hmm. Yep. How many times would you do 12 weaves in a training session? I actually don't count. I look at what my dog is doing and offering and how much I have changed from a previous session. Am I pushing the limit on, hey, I'm trying a little bit more here? And if so, when they get it, I'm done. I'm backing off. I'm taking the pressure off. So there isn't a magic number. It's really about taking what your dog is doing and appreciating it. And I also think that sometimes when you do fewer reps, go do something else, and then come back and have them do it once, that's much more like a trial environment, right? Because you've done it once, you went, let's just say you were then working on contacts or you were doing jumps, and then you come back to the weave poles. Well, your dog has to mentally switch into weave pole mode. And if they do it right, you know what? We're done. That was really, really good. And so I think the less reps in that case mimics a trial environment much more so than the rep and the rep and the rep and the rep. I think that's sometimes where the training becomes unrealistic and it becomes harder to move from the from the training environment into the trial environment. Any thoughts on that, Stacy?
No, I agree with all of that. Obviously anything is dog dependent. I don't want to drill anything both from a mental aspect and a physical aspect. So, I want to keep in mind that weave training in general is very mentally taxing. So very rarely do I work long enough to make my dog physically tired, but they're going to wear out mentally very quickly. So I keep that in mind really more so than how many times we're doing, any particular obstacle is how hard is my dog really mentally working at this task.
Yeah. Awesome. Someone asked, when does this begin? September 8th is when we're going to start. What is your view on throwing food at the end of the poles? There's a lot of depends on that one, believe it or not. A lot of depends. So I think there is a time and place for everything where the balance, how are you going to balance certain things, right? Because I've also seen where if you put a manners minder out, the dog's, depending on how a handler has used it, the dog's like, well, there ain't no manners minder, so I'm not doing it, right? So then there is a time that you need to actually be having the reward because you're not going to have a manners minder in competition. So I think there is a time and a place for every single tool. I think it's incredibly important to switch those up, because that is much more like the trial environment, and your dogs will learn patterns much faster than you recognize. A perfect example is I had a dog where I would take my glasses off, I would flip the arm down, and that sound would wake my dog up, and they knew that they were going out to do something. Dogs are incredibly smart. And so that's where that whole let's change it around part comes in. Stacy, what do you have?
Well, I think that that's definitely all true as far as that goes. It's very dog dependent. My only skill that I want to make sure that my dogs have before I have food on my body is the ability to forward focus independently. So that's really the main issue with having food on you. I train with rewards, whether it be food or toy, on me all the time. But the very first thing my little tiny baby puppies do is learn how to forward focus. So they don't care whether or not the reward is actually on me because it's not delivered on my body. So they know that they just run out to a bowl, to the manners minder, to the placement of the dead toy. So then now if I run with a toy in my hand and I'm giving them the cue to drive forward, they know just keep going forward. The toy will show up at some point. So I think that's a more important skill to have first. And then it doesn't really matter whether you have the food on you or not. The other thing is how good of a thrower are you? It needs to go in the right place. So I have some students that always give me their reward so I can throw it because they just can't accurately get it in the right place. So that's another skill that the handler needs to have in order to be able to throw food.
Yeah, there's so many things that come into play. And sometimes we bring that food out before, we really want to deliver it. And then your dog reads that message. So yeah, there's a time and place for everything. For the 2x2 class, do you need a complete set of 12 poles?
You don't need a complete set of 12 2x2s. If the intent in the class is to train a full set of 12 poles, then you will need access to 12, but only 6 of those need to be 2x2s. So you don't actually have to have a full set of 2x2s unless you just want to. I actually find it more handy to have one solid set of 6 and then the 2x2s, because that way it's less poles that get moved around as your dog is driving through them once they get to 12. And the same that Lisa brought up earlier with the person that said they only had 6 channel weaves. You know, if 6 is all you have, then 6 is what you have. And, you know, obviously you're well aware at some point you will have to have access to 12 poles. But, you know, you'll still be able to get quite a bit out of the class, even if you're just working with 6 poles.
Yep, absolutely. Let's see. So somebody said, how do I register? So you go to spotonagility.com/weaves. And as soon as I'm done with this webinar, I will get the page where our courses are offered. I will get that up onto there. We just didn't want to put that up before we had a chance to, you know, have all of you guys have the opportunity to sign up first. Let's see. So lots of great dones. This sounds exactly like what's going on. So they're really following the, you know, loved our advice on that. Thank you for doing this. My gosh, lots of great compliments here. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I do believe that is the last question that we have. If you have any future questions on either of the offerings that we have, the advanced or the beginner, the channel or the 2x2, you can send that to Lisa at spotonagility.com. And again, you can go to spotonagility.com/weaves. And I really am looking forward to having all of you join us. As you can tell, Stacy and I absolutely love what we're doing here. We love working with each of you. We completely geek out on watching your videos and really talking about it live with each of you. And if you can't make the live, that's okay. That's why we have the replays. But I think that the personal feedback that you get from a conversation like this with video is so critical, and it's much more like a conversation, and that's what we want as your coaches. So, all right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We are thrilled to be here. And yes, that replay is coming, and your friends can watch that as well. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Stacy, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. Good night, everybody. Bye.
Good night.